Witnesses all. Good morning. I suggest that you pause this devotional video and read Romans chapter 1 again. Read it before you continue, okay? Okay, finished reading? Okay. Well, we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to dive into the study. We recently finished reading about Paul wanting to go visit the Christians at Rome. He'd not been able to go visit them yet, but he continued to pray, asking God's will for him to go or not. Always in my prayers, asking that somehow, by God's will, I may now at last succeed in coming to you. We already know that one reason that Paul wanted to go to visit the Christians at Rome was what? Well, he wanted to encourage them, and also he wanted to receive encouragement from them. But there's more that he has to say about this. Let's look at verse 13. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that I have often intended to come to you, but thus far have been prevented, in order that I may reap some harvest among you, as well as among the rest of the Gentiles. Hey, the word harvest that Paul uses in the verse, he wants to gather all in from the Jews and the Gentiles. What does he mean? Well, first, we need to consider all of the chapter 1. We need to be careful to do that, to take it in context. We do not want to go off and have any misunderstandings about what he's meaning by harvest. Before, we read in verse 11 and 12. Now, Paul is going to expound on that in verse 13. The word harvest that he's using as an example, and we have in our mind a picture of a garden full of vegetables and also of an orchard full of fruit trees. The vegetables and the fruit are now ripened and they are ready to be picked, harvested. Now, Paul, he did not mean literally that he was going to harvest food from them. No. He wanted to collect spiritual fruit from them so that he could give it back to them. It means he wanted to encourage them. And he wanted to encourage them to make them strong and steadfast in the faith. The next verse 14, is very clear that he had an obligation to give out spiritual fruit. That's the gospel. I am under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to wise and to the foolish. Paul, he had an obligation, responsibility to spread the gospel. Why? Because God called him to. What God called him to do? To preach and to teach to all people. Didn't matter who. People in high society and also people who were thought of as lowly and ignored. People who were wise and people who were fools. All people. All people. Of course, we know that Paul had in his mind that the main group that he was to go to preach was who? The Gentiles. Also, there are other groups who were in Rome. For example, the Jews and the Greeks, and those are the people who inhabited Greece. The other group, the barbarians, that is people from another nation that the Greeks looked down on. They called them barbarians. I am under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and to the foolish. How do we apply verse 13 and 14 to our lives? How do we apply it? Remember, the Bible, it's for us today. Not only for the people long ago, but today. The Bible points us to Christ. Paul, he's a good example for us of how that we should live as Christians. Now, how do we apply these two verses to our lives? Well, we're witnesses to all people. What do? We tell them about the gospel. Yes, but there's more. We help people who need help, and maybe someone's suffering. We can be there to encourage them and lead them to develop a relationship with us. Then we can spread the gospel to them. That's what Paul did. We should follow his good example. Coram Deo.